I think that Brian admired us, and wanted kind of approval from us. And so he played this multiple track of him singing.
Carol Kaye made her way into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as arguably one of the most prolific and influential bass guitarists and session musicians in music history. Her humble beginnings translated into a stellar career in the industry and would set an example of how perseverance, talent, and adaptation helped her become what she is today. At the peak of her career, Brian Wilson was one name that was of great significance. Recently, Kaye has deemed it necessary to let the world know about her relationship with Brian Wilson and the role that he played in her rise to fame. Stay with us and we will get to that in a bit. But first, let's take a deeper look at the lives of these legends. Carol Kaye was born on March 24, 1935 in Everett, Washington, into a poor family, and her parents were musicians. Her father played the trombone while her mother was a piano player. From the early exposure she had gotten from her parents' music, she came to love it. As would be expected, her childhood days were not great either. All the financial hurdles took a heavy toll on the family, and Kaye had to fight her way out, carrying a load of challenges right from her childhood days. The only thing that was stable was the music in which she started finding herself being immersed. At 13, her mother finally had enough saved to buy her a steel string guitar so that Kaye could begin experimenting with the guitar and building her skills. She seemed to be a natural talent with a great sense of rhythm and timing that were later to be the hallmarks of her style. In her late teens, she started playing professional jazz guitar, mainly playing in clubs around Los Angeles. The world of jazz wasn't easy to navigate, but an earnest work ethic and exacting technique helped her build up a local reputation within the circle of music lovers. It wasn't until the late 1950s that Kaye's course in life was due for a change when, in 1957, she was invited onto her first recording session to play on Sam Cooke's single Summertime. The leap from live jazz playing into studio work proved to be a huge change in Kaye's career, launching her into an entirely different realm of possibility. Soon, she gained recognition for her capability of making memorable lines and hooks, whatever the genre. However, Kaye's versatility really came into the spotlight when she was asked to play electric bass, which was a very unfamiliar instrument to her at the time. Working on a session with then-producer Phil Spector in the early 1960s, she was asked to switch to bass guitar. Quite undaunted, she picked up the bass and immediately found a unique voice on the instrument. Her ability to adapt to changes and remarkable rhythmic intuition made her an irreplaceable asset in the studio. Beyond the successes, Kaye's rise as a session musician was not without challenges, mainly because she was a female among males. During the 1960s and 1970s, one hardly saw any woman playing as a session musician. It is tough for females to get recognition and come out of this gender bias that was so evident. People thought she was just an assistant or somebody running errands until she started playing. But obviously she spoke through her talent, and little by little she received respect from the producers, arrangers, and other musicians. Yet despite her success, Kaye was continually confronted with the reality of being under-acknowledged, considering that session musicians were invisible in the 60s, and often their names didn't appear on albums. The bass lines that Kaye played on track after track of hit songs became signature elements. Yet most people never knew she was integral to the creation of the record. As fate would have it, she became an integral part of the Wrecking Crew, as one of the finest session musicians by the 1960s. This very group of studio players had the likes of Hal Blaine, Tommy Tedesco, and Glenn Campbell. It accounts for many of the most recognizable music from that era. Kaye's bass lines helped give shape to rock, pop, and soul records of both the 1960s and early 1970s when working with the Wrecking Crew. Perhaps her most renowned projects were with the Beach Boys on Pet Sounds, Brian Wilson's iconic album. Her bass playing on cuts like Good Vibrations and Wouldn't It Be Nice provides perfect examples of her creativity and knowledge of harmonic structure. It was her work with Wilson that proved how well she could adapt her jazz background to the more pop-oriented demands of the time. Over the years, she had recorded with such artists as Simon and Garfunkel, Ray Charles, Frank Sinatra, and Quincy Jones. Her playing was integral in songs such as Sonny and Cher's The Beat Goes On. She played at more than 10,000 recording sessions during her career. Even as Kaye had been having quite the career, there was one thing that finally did wear on her, and that was the lack of recognition for her contribution. Most of the singles she played on were credited solely to the artist and the producer. This left her with very little incentive to carry on with her career, but her love for music kept her in the game. On the other hand, by the 1970s, the world of music was getting modernized. New ways of recording and synthesizers were in use, and the effect of that change was deeply felt by session players like Kaye. The heyday of the session player was long gone, and with disco and punk now the musical order of things, demand for session players like Kaye reduced, and she mostly retired from session playing to concentrate on other areas of the music world. In the 1970s, Kaye decided to go another route different from playing by publishing bass and guitar method books that remain among the most respected in the business. As an educator, her method was dependent on establishing a solid rhythmic foundation and an understanding of chordal structure. Thus, her teaching texts became staples for students of the bass guitar worldwide. During those years also, Kaye won several prizes and acclaim, as nobody was ever found to equate her art and style. She set the template, not only with her grooves but also her melodic bass lines for so many other artists in so many genres, even to this day. Before we go into what she has to say about Brian Wilson, let's take a look and learn a thing or two about Wilson. Brian Wilson was born on June 20, 1942 in Inglewood, California, and is widely regarded as one of the most innovative songwriters, composers, and producers in popular modern music. As the primary creative force behind the Beach Boys, Wilson's career has been marked by a signature of visionary composition, lush harmonies, and an uncanny capacity to shape popular music through fearless production methods. Rare for a young boy, Wilson had an ear for music. He grew up listening to jazz and pop, along with being fascinated by the harmonies of groups like the Four Freshmen, which much later proved to have a huge influence on his style. In 1961, along with his brothers Carl and Dennis, his cousin Mike Love, and a friend Al Jardine, he formed the Beach Boys. Early songs such as Surfin' Safari and Surfin' USA dealt with California beach culture and also became a pop phenomenon. Beginning in 1964, shortly after I Get Around and Fun, 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 which were two of their earliest hits, Wilson's career became a lot more interesting. First, he was increasingly present in the production chair, affording him even broader platforms to attempt experiments in studio direction. The work of Phil Spector and his wall of sound approach, where instruments are layered atop one another to create a dense, full sound, was a huge influence on Wilson's production style. Compositions grew increasingly elaborate once Brian started introducing odd instruments and studio tricks into his music. In 1966, Wilson and the Beach Boys released Pet Sounds, which was considered by many critics to be one of the great rock albums. Songs like God Only Knows and Wouldn't It Be Nice reflected the ornate arrangements, poetically personal lyrics, and innovative studio work that Wilson had arrived at. Although it had some commercial, lukewarm beginnings, it was an album that all the other musicians loved, including the Beatles themselves, making one of the main influences for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The scope of Wilson's imagination ran high, though he and the band got to experience some challenges in 1967 because of building pressures, a fight with mental health issues, and disagreements with bandmates. In the wake of that misstep, his reputation as a true visionary grew and influenced his work from that time forward. However, the next couple of decades were not exactly easy on Wilson. He struggled with mental health and addiction. Wilson returned to music in the late 1970s and again as a solo artist in the 1990s. In 2004, he finally had the opportunity to release Smile and receive critical acclaim to prove that his mind was there as a composer all this time. Brian Wilson's career speaks volumes about the fertility of his imagination, and his ability to reinvent himself. He pioneered new recording techniques, extended the possibility of pop music expression, and inspired scores of artists. Today, he would safely claim a position in musical history that has him as a driving force behind some of the most loved and innovative music of the 20th century. His legacy lives on through harmony, production, and emotional depth in his songwriting, which has influenced generations of musicians. Kaye's collaborations with Brian Wilson remain among the most innovative team-ups in pop music. The two continued to help each other raise their work to new heights through the 1960s. Wilson employed Kaye mostly as the Beach Boys' chief creative force. Kaye's bass work was an integral part of the sound he realized on hits like Good Vibrations and Wouldn't It Be Nice. Kaye joined Wilson and the Beach Boys as part of the Wrecking Crew, a coterie of elite Los Angeles session musicians who helped bring the visions of countless artists to life. Wilson's sessions were uniquely challenging, pushing Kaye and other musicians to explore and expand their abilities. By nature of his often meticulous experimental approach, Wilson would have Kaye frequently try some pretty unusual approaches to bring out the bass-emphasized melodies and harmonic structures rather than traditional rhythm. One of the main influences that Wilson brought to Kaye's craft was the way he tried to push the boundaries in the studio. Wilson would then overdub multiple takes to create his characteristic lush, orchestral sound. He pushed Kaye to discover new possibilities in her instrument by having her often play further up the fretboard or add melodic elements into the bass line that wouldn't normally be there. This unusual approach not only expanded Wilson's work, but also gave Kaye the opportunity to begin to formulate a signature style that would typify much of her career. For example, in songs like Good Vibrations, Kaye's bass lines took on another dimension, exceeding rhythm to support the song's melodic progression. Her detailed, memorable parts gave Wilson's music a rhythmic foundation, but rich harmonic depth provided the emotionally resonant sound with which it would be so closely associated. Wilson's fondness for melodic and almost symphonic arrangements made Kaye more of an arranger rather than just a bass player, placing her in the middle of the creative process rather than simply being a technical contributor. Besides that, Kaye learned from Wilson's extreme devotion to precision and perfection from Wilson. He was notorious for his endless revising and relentlessness in pursuit of the perfect sound, which pushed Kaye to work more meticulously with her craft. Kaye continued with attention to detail and experimentation, and it formed part of her trademark style in later projects. Ultimately, it was Wilson's experimental vision and willingness to blur boundaries in the studio that left an indelible mark on Kaye. Not only did their collaborations help shape the Beach Boys' innovative sound, but such sessions allowed Kaye to find a voice on the bass that was pioneering and influential. Working with Wilson pushed Kaye to rise to the challenge of bettering her craft, which yielded some of her most enduring and critically acclaimed performances, with her contributions helping to shape the sound of an entire era of music. Kaye no doubt had a career full of groundbreaking success and collaboration with legends, but her personal life was riddled with struggles and setbacks. While Kaye was making magic in the studio, laying down unforgettable bass lines for the Beach Boys, Simon and Garfunkel, and scores of other artists, her marital life wasn't quite as harmonious as her sounds. Behind her successes was a complex and challenging personal journey of how her commitment to her craft many times clashed with the demands and expectations of family life. Kaye married and divorced several times, a fact she has spoken about with regret and acceptance. Her first marriage took place when she was still in her teens. Like many young people of that period, the yearning for children was strong in her. Unfortunately, she soon found herself in an unsatisfying emotional relationship, with the toils of married life and motherhood conflicting sharply with her emerging musical aspirations. As Kaye's musical career gained momentum, her love of music exceeded the expectations her partner had for a wife and mother. Her first marriage ended in divorce, making her a single mother while continuing her music career. The second marriage was no different. At this point, Kaye was deep into the music scene and as one of the most in-demand bass players in Los Angeles, found studio work requiring incredibly long hours, which often came with uncertain schedules and further complicated the balancing act. Her husband found it difficult to cope with her fame and career seriousness, and tensions later surged into her marriage as Kaye's success continued to rise. Such stress in keeping a relationship when involved in such a challenging industry proved an enormous burden, and this second marriage also came to an end. Similarly to her second, Kaye's third marriage started out typical enough. She had by that time also established herself as one of the best musicians around, and both her colleagues and her fans respected and admired her. The time and energy Kaye put into her career barely left room for her relationship. She said her work came first, and while this passion led her to enormous success in her career, it came at a high personal cost. With each marriage, a constant battle emerged for Kaye, having to decide between leading a fulfilling personal life or continuing relentlessly with her music. Unfortunately, like the previous two, the third one ended in divorce too. The more significant expectation of society at large made life more burdensome for Kaye. In the 1960s and 70s, women often had to choose between successful careers and family stability. Kaye was ambitious about making a name for herself in a male-dominated industry, but on the way to success, she often found herself running across those who, as companions, felt uneasy with her ambition and the unconventional lifestyle that came with her music career. Kaye herself has reflected on the attendant difficulties that came with both being a mother and a professional musician in an era that gave little support to women in either position. Parenting alone proved tough with the erratic hours and intense demands of session work. With no one to help, she had to struggle during hard times, often working into the night after putting the kids to bed. Single parenthood came bearing loads of financial and emotional stresses, yet she could brave all that through her resilience and commitment to her craft. With her children, she was very proud of them and worked hard toward giving them a stable home, even as her romantic relationships were turbulent. In later years, Kaye has spoken candidly about her marriages, including the sacrifices and challenges she had to make along the way. Though personal relationships may not have brought Kaye the same fulfillment or stability as her music career, Kaye has voiced no regrets about the choices she made. She understands that a love of music requires her to make sacrifices, and for her those sacrifices meant making artistic choices. Her work brought far more satisfaction and success than her relationships, and she looks back on her career as a testament to determination and survival. Kaye's personal story really mirrored those of so many women in the arts struggling through social pressures, familial expectations, and professional ambitions in a world that oftentimes made them choose one over the rest. Though married life did not quite mirror the success and respect she received from her professional career, Kaye has risen as an icon of resilience, resolve, and independence. She is enshrined not only by the colossal contribution she gave to music, but also by the determination to live life on her own terms, often placing the artistic vision ahead of personal life. Ultimately, Kaye's story reminds us that success comes with certain challenges, and her life reflects those complexities found in many women balancing personal relationships with professional aspirations. Her music is an inspiration, but more than that, her personal story reflects the travails and triumphs of a pioneering woman who made her mark in the music industry. We hope you enjoyed the video. Do subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in the next one.